The tensions between Egypt, Israel, and the United States are escalating to new levels. There was a report a few days back that the United States sent B-52 bombers off the shores of Egypt to try and intimidate Egypt following its refusal and outright rejection against Donald Trump's plan to ethnically cleanse the population of Gaza. However, now there was a new report that said that no, actually Egypt now, they prevented two B-52 bombers from entering Egyptian airspace. Now, for those of you who don't know, with B-52, you're talking about the largest bomber in the whole world. Over 30 tons they can hold of explosives or weapons, and they sent two of them following a trip from the United Kingdom. For a while, they waited in the Crete area. Then they went to the Egyptian area trying to cross. After they asked the Egyptian side, can we enter the Egyptian airspace? They got the surprise. Egypt said, no, you're not allowed to enter. This raised alarm bells. Firstly, the level of alertness went up to red. There was communication with the Congress, and the team on the B-52, they had to take urgent measures. After serious discussions on top and high levels, the B-52s, one of them went through Jordanian airspace, whilst the other one went off the radar. What does this signal, all of this? This shows the level of tensions between Egypt and not only Israel but the United States as well, especially as these B-52s were fully ready and prepared, and from an Egyptian perspective they were not trusting what's happening with the United States. And when it comes to Egypt and the United States, you're talking about allies at the end of the day. They conduct drills together. The United States sends money to Egypt too. But the level of tensions are reaching new levels, and the Egyptian side is not trusting even the American side, and they refuse to allow them entry of the B-52 bombers. All of that is proving that the tensions are real, especially following the refusal of the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi from going to the United States. He was invited to go for a visit. Donald Trump himself said, I'm going to meet the Jordanian king and the Egyptian leader very soon. He met the Jordanian king, but he didn't meet the Egyptian leader, although the Egyptian leader is available to go to visits. He was in Spain. He was just in a visit in Spain. Of course, Spain is a country that has a better position than other European countries when it comes to Palestine. And he was hailing the support of Spain and its brave positions in relation to the Palestinian cause. And he also was criticizing Israel, saying that they need to remove their occupation from Gaza, from Lebanon, and from Syria as well. So the Egyptian president can travel. He's having this trip, but he's still not meeting Donald Trump. This, alongside this report that Egypt is preventing the B-52s, is a proof that there are genuine tensions between Egypt, Israel, and the United States. And we have a more serious confirmation now coming from none other than Jonathan Pollard. Jonathan Pollard is the most famous Israeli spy. The man was imprisoned in the United States for 3 decades. Reports that he was serving Israel, selling info to the previous Soviet Union. Many of the things that he's done were considered to be red lines crossed by the United States, and after multiple attempts, he was finally released 30 years later. But now, he's having statements, the man is talking, but he's not only talking out of his own accord. Jonathan Pollard is in a good relationship with people who are serving in Israel, in the military, in politics. He's very much involved. And he had this to say when it comes to Egypt and the prospect of a war between Egypt and Israel.
We now have, and I know a lot of people are going to be a little bit shocked by this, but I want people to wake up to the inevitability of war with Egypt. We are going to have a war with Egypt. I have talked, and I can't say exactly who I talked with, but I want to assure people, these are people in the know, people in uniform, in the know. We are not prepared for that. Just as we were not prepared to go into Gaza on October 8th or on October 7th to stop this invasion, though we had the war plan, Hamas's war plan, we are not prepared right now in any way, shape, or form to deal with a conflict with Egypt in the Sinai. Having said that, would we win a war? We would, but at a cost that will be staggering. It's the definition of a Pyrrhic victory. We would win, but at such a loss, we would question really whether it was worth it. The issue here is ever since Camp David was signed, particularly with regard to the troop limitations that were imposed on Egypt, that would prevent them, presumably, from remilitarizing the Sinai and posing a threat to us comparable to the one that they posed in 1967. Egypt, from day one, violated that by building out military infrastructure, munitions dumps, various logistic facilities. They bought a tank, the M1 Abrams from the United States, that, believe it or not, from prison, when I was in prison, I wrote people, it was published, that the reason why Egypt chose that tank was not just because they were going to get it for free from the United States, because it was the one tank, because of its gas turbine engine, that would allow them to quickly deploy armored formations on our border, Negev border, before we were fully mobilized. Now, that is what I saw. In point blank, and the United States said, okay, fine, we don't care about this. That's another matter. But Egypt from day one has been preparing for war. Their major war plan has us as the most probable enemy. Their deployments are for Sinai, not for Western Egypt, not for Southern Egypt, but for Sinai. And so we agreed stupidly to allow them to increase their troop deployments and their armor and self-propelled artillery into Sinai, ostensibly to deal with an ISIS affiliate in the Sinai. An ISIS affiliate that didn't need Egyptian heavy artillery or armor or anything else to deal with. But we looked the other way, stupidly. And here we are. Now, is Sisi serious about going to war with us? And the answer is yes. And the reason for that really has more to do with Arab culture than it is with Arab calculation. Sisi, being an Arab strongman, a dictator, would rather lose a war that he fought for Egypt's honor than to bend to an American diktat, to allow the Palestinians in or to lower back to his requirements according to Camp David of troop deployments in Sinai. I've written already that yes, the U.S. is threatening Egypt now with a cutoff of spare parts, maintenance, whatever, if they don't agree to this transfer deal. Egypt, once before made a transition from Soviet equipment to largely American equipment after Camp David. That was the bribe that was given them. And since that time, they've been attempting very quietly, but very methodically, to diversify their arms supplies and their military equipment. So right now, he's willing to have them cut off, the U.S. cut off arms, cut off maintenance, cut off spare parts, cut off economic assistance, everything. Egypt has already been given assurances by Qatar, Saudi Arabia, two countries that I'm aware of right now, that they'll make good whatever money the U.S. Cuts off from Egypt. But having said that, yes, he's prepared to go down fighting. Because the alternative is he's going to end up like Sadat. He'll be assassinated for being a weak person, a weak leader. The Arab culture will tolerate a strong loser rather than what's called a weak winner in this case. So yes, he will fight. He'll overplay his hand, as he must, to keep the street happy in Egypt, and he will lose.
So as we can see, he's speaking with people who are high-ranking, uniforms, currently active, and saying that Israel was stupid to allow Egypt to get more weapons and arms into Sinai. The war between Israel and Egypt is as inevitable as the sun rising from the east. It's an imminent war, he's telling the people. And this information is coming from people with high ranks in uniforms inside of Israel. Sisi is serious about going to war, even if that means a loss according to him. And during his speech, during his program, he was actually talking about the level of casualties. At one point later on, he spoke about the Suez Canal and the fact that Israel might have a deal with the Trump administration. And he said that no population will be in any of the areas around the Suez Canal, confirming that Israel will be using non-conventional weapons. These are very dangerous statements coming from a person like Jonathan Pollard, who is very close to the top figures inside of Israel. This man held a very serious position previously as a spy, and now he's still in the know-how and he's still in communication with top leaders. And that needs to raise alarm bells inside of Egypt, as well as anyone listening to it, with the level and severity of these statements. Which leads us to Gaza. There was a report in Israeli newspaper Ma'arif that, hold on a second, Hamas is monitoring everything inside of Gaza and they're preparing side bombs for the next round with the IDF, and they're moving next to IDF troops only tens of meters, and the IDF isn't able to do anything to them sometimes when they're just dozens of meters away from the IDF forces inside of Gaza, because the agreement bans them from doing so. They said several weeks since the beginning, and the reservists are saying how the Israeli army is losing all of the deterrence against Hamas. Based on multiple statements coming in, Hamas are increasing their maneuvers inside of Gaza, people digging next to the perimeter or the buffer zone that Israel created temporarily before they withdraw from it. They said that many of these diggings by Hamas, they're there to put explosives in preparation for the IDF to come back in. Landmines, explosives, in case Israel wants to go back to a full-scale war. And they're also recovering all of their tunnel systems. And the fact that Hamas is at the same capacity of activity when it comes to Gaza is alarming to them. They also said that Hamas are not only doing things, they're sitting there and monitoring. Multiple Israeli terrorists in the area, they said that multiple Hamas members sit next to the forces and they observe them for hours, seeing their weakness points, their movements, what they do, what they don't do, only a few meters away from the IDF forces who are monitoring the situation. And according to the report, Israel is banned from lifting a finger against them and is only allowed to fire warning shots in case the Hamas forces come too close to them to a level where they feel threatened. This report is bothering many in Israel, and this is one of those reports that's supposed to be a secret. The whole ceasefire agreement hasn't been published in its entirety. All we're getting is small pieces of information being released, and sometimes we have leaks such as this one. Then the Israeli population are realizing, and it sinks in further, how big the defeat is from Hamas. We have already 95% of the Israeli population believing that Hamas won the war. Only 5% of Israelis believe that Israel won. Reports like this make it more clear to the Israeli population, to everyone else, how much of a defeat it was for Israel in Gaza and how much Hamas is still capable. Now, there are talks about phase 2. And more talks from Israel, the garbage talk about Hamas having to disarm. And Hamas told them again, disarm in your dreams. Ain't gonna happen. The talks about disarming Hamas, disarming the resistance, or, banning them from having a relationship with Iran or whatever, these things are out of the question. And the funny thing is, Israel already knows that these conditions are impossible. So the fact that they're saying it is only for public PR stunts, nothing else. They know that Hamas are refusing all of that. They are accepting the fact that Hamas is on the ground now and they're not doing anything because of the ceasefire agreement with them, and they already declared that they're going into a phase 2 in the war. How do they think that after all of this bombardment and the fact that Hamas did not give up throughout the worst barbaric atrocities, this genocide and infanticide in Gaza, that they would give up their weapons now? What makes them even think that? And people need to understand this is part of the PR and propaganda machine of Israel, of Donald Trump as well, of two defeated states that want to act like they have been victorious. At the end of the day, Israel went to a ceasefire agreement that Hamas dictated. All of the thick lines of the resistance were met. Yes, there are breaches. Yes, there are delays. Yes, there are challenges. But you're talking about a genocidal, outlaw pariah state supported by the world's biggest state of terror in the world. So there's no surprise. However, all of these statements are coming to show that Israel has somewhat of a say, to create this illusion to the people that Israel still has a say when it comes to Gaza and what needs to happen inside of Gaza. And that's also doing one other thing. What is it doing? It's doing something very important that Israel and its allies always use, by the way, which is deflection. They are focusing on the other side, the victim, and the fact that they need to disarm. They need to be the ones who leave Gaza to move the argument that's supposed to take place and is supposed to be repeated constantly. Israel is the state that needs to be dismantled. Israel is the state that needs to be disarmed. And Israel is the state that must have its regime taken down. Israel is a war criminal entity in accordance to international law. Israel is a country that has committed genocide in accordance to international law. Israel massacred Palestinians, Israelis, prisoners, journalists, healthcare staff, infants, newborns. Israel is the problem. Israel is what must be dismantled. Israel is what must be disarmed. However, they're moving this focus on the other side, on the victim, to move the focus from them, shift it away from them, from the actual criminals, to the victims. Oh, hold on a second. The victims, we need to beat them and they need to shut up, basically. They can't say a word. But when they lift a finger, all of the focus goes on them. And that's very important because not many people talk about the need to completely dismantle this Zionist entity altogether. At the end of the day, you're talking about a country that killed over 50,000 innocent Palestinians, with over 10,000 missing now, 70% of which are women and children, and they're still committing massacres in the West Bank, still occupying parts of Lebanon, still occupying parts of Syria. Which leads me to the final thing that I wanted to talk to you about. In Lebanon, Israel is still in 5 points. And now there was an interesting report in Israel that there has been a serious incident happening in Lebanon, and not from the Lebanese. It's coming from Israelis. According to the report, they're saying Haredim went into Lebanon. However, the thing is a little bit more complicated than that. You're talking about people who want to settle in Lebanon. You're talking about Zionist settlers. During the war in Lebanon, many Israelis started to protest that we need to go and live back in Lebanon. Lebanon is biblical land. Lebanon is holy to us. and we need to go there and pray, and we need to go there and settle. You see, when we don't have settlements, we get problems. If we settle there, we wouldn't have any problems whatsoever. And they started to have a couple of protests here and there, and you had people in the Israeli squatting establishment saying that, oh, of course, it's necessary. Lebanon, let's settle Greater Israel. And then Netanyahu himself saying, make Palestine in Saudi Arabia. Okay, what did they do? What this report said? They said that the IDF saw Orthodox Jews, not settlers, and that's unlikely for Orthodox Jews to do that. It's the settlement or squatting establishment that usually do that. Go to other territories and start to pray and all of that. They said they went into the Lebanese territories where the IDF is present, illegally occupying, and 2 soldiers were injured because some of them actually started to attack the soldiers because they wanted to prevent them from going there and praying. This is the same mentality of those insane lunatics who are in the West Bank. If the Israeli army, for example, tells them, oh no, one of those locations is, you can't necessarily be there now, they'll go and attack them. And they're doing the same thing in Lebanon. This is a very important sign that there is a genuine interest by at least some in Israel to continue and expand. Like they have these expansionist plans in Gaza, like Daniela Weiss is calling for people to go and settle in Gaza, or in Smotrich as well, trying to ethnically cleanse Gaza. They actually visited Gaza during the genocide too. They're trying to do the same thing with Lebanon. And this proves the nature of Israel as a state. Israel is a neo-colonialist, expansionist, supremacist entity. And the last part of their borders is where the foot of the last soldier steps, like David Ben Gurion said, or Ben Gurun, his original name. And this is the country that we're talking about, and this is the danger that globally people need to be talking about, not the fact that the victims of that state oppose it, resist it, and stand up against it.